Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Quiet Life. Matthew Casey stood at his kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the Portland skyline in shades of gold and amber. At 42, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming coffee mug, he looked like any other suburban father preparing for another ordinary day. But the 3 surgical scars running along his left shoulder told a different story, one he'd buried deep beneath years of domestic tranquility. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the coffee maker. Christine, his wife of 18 years, still slept upstairs, and their daughter Lana had left early for her college classes at Portland State. Matthew cherished these quiet moments before the world demanded his attention as a construction foreman. He checked his phone and found a text from his crew chief. Bridge project delayed. Take the day off, boss. A rare gift. Matthew decided to surprise Christine with breakfast in bed, something he hadn't done since their anniversary. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, his mind wandered to simpler times when his biggest worry was whether to use whole wheat or white bread for toast. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, back when he was Sergeant First Class Casey of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Before Marseille, before he earned a nickname that still made hardened criminals cross themselves, before he met Dante Finley. The eggs sizzled in the pan, and Matthew forced those memories back into their locked compartment. He'd built this life brick by brick, and nothing would threaten it. He was no longer the devil of Marseille. He was just Matthew Casey, devoted husband and father. But as he climbed the stairs with Christine's breakfast tray, he couldn't shake the feeling that his peaceful world was about to shatter. Christine stirred as he entered their bedroom, her auburn hair catching the morning light. "What's this?" she asked, smiling as he set the tray on her nightstand. "Just thought I'd spoil my beautiful wife," he said, kissing her forehead. "I got the day off." Lucky me." She pulled him down for a proper kiss. "What should we do with this unexpected freedom?" Matthew was about to suggest a drive up the coast when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Hello, devil." The voice hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Dante Finley. After 15 years of silence, the ghost from his past had found him. "You have the wrong number," Matthew said calmly, walking out of earshot. "Do I?" Matthew Casey, 1247 Elm Street, Portland, Oregon. Married to Christine, father to Lana. Should I continue? Matthew's blood turned to ice. "What do you want, Dante?" "Justice. For what you did to me in Marseille. For what you took from me. That was a long time ago. Different life, different world. Not for me, it wasn't. Every day, I've lived with your gift." Dante's voice carried 15 years of festering hatred. 3 scars across my chest, courtesy of your knife. A reminder of how the devil humiliated me in front of my men. Matthew remembered that night in the Marseille docks. Dante running a human trafficking ring, selling girls to the highest bidder. The Rangers had no official jurisdiction, but Matthew couldn't walk away. Not when he saw those terrified faces. "You got what you deserved," Matthew said. "We'll see about that. I built something beautiful since then, Matthew. An empire that spans 3 continents. And you know what the cornerstone of that empire is? Patience. The patience to wait 15 years for the perfect moment to destroy you." The line went dead. Matthew stared at the phone, his hands trembling slightly. He'd hoped Dante was dead, hoped the international manhunt had caught up with him. But instead, the monster had grown stronger. He returned to the bedroom, where Christine was enjoying her breakfast. She looked up, concern creasing her features. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just work stuff," he lied, hating himself for it. "I need to run some errands. I'll be back this afternoon." Matthew kissed her goodbye, grabbed his keys, and headed for his truck. He had preparations to make, because if Dante Finley was back, the devil of Marseille would need to wake up. And this time, he had everything to lose. Chapter 2, Shadows and Secrets. The storage unit sat in an industrial district 20 minutes from Matthew's house, a place Christine knew nothing about. Unit 247 contained the remnants of his former life, weapons, documents, and equipment he'd hoped never to touch again. Matthew punched in the code, and raised the metal door. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light as he surveyed his arsenal. Combat knives, tactical gear, encrypted communication devices, and enough firepower to outfit a small army. All legally acquired through his military connections, all maintained in perfect condition. He pulled out a manila folder marked Finley Dante. Inside were photographs, intelligence reports, and psychological profiles dating back to his Ranger days. Dante's file read like a horror novel. Human trafficking, arms dealing, murder for hire. A man who treated human suffering as a commodity. The photos showed a handsome man in his early 30s with cold blue eyes and platinum blonde hair. But Matthew knew the current Dante would look different. The 3 scars he'd given him ran from collarbone to sternum, deep enough to require extensive surgery, permanent enough to serve as a daily reminder. Matthew's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number containing a single photo. His blood froze. It was Lana, walking across the Portland State campus. The photo had been taken that morning. He could tell by her outfit. Someone had been watching his daughter. Another text arrived. Beautiful girl. Shame if something happened to her. Matthew's hands clenched into fists. Dante was playing psychological warfare, but he'd made a critical error. He'd threatened the one thing that would fully awaken the devil of Marseille. Matthew selected a combat knife from his collection, the same model he'd used in Marseille. Its weight felt familiar in his hand, like greeting an old friend. He strapped it to his ankle, then chose a compact Glock 19 for concealed carry. His phone rang. This time he was ready. "You got my message," Dante said. "Touch my daughter, and I'll finish what I started 15 years ago." "Oh, Matthew, you still don't understand. I'm not here to kill you. That would be too merciful. I'm here to destroy everything you love, piece by piece, while you watch helplessly. What's your game, Dante? It's already in motion. See, I learned something interesting about your perfect little family. Your daughter isn't quite as loyal as you think. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, has Lana been having money troubles lately? Student loans, perhaps? Living expenses?" Matthew's stomach dropped. Lana had mentioned being stressed about finances, but he'd assumed it was normal college concerns. "I help her out," Dante continued. $50,000 deposited into her account over the past 6 months. Small amounts, seemingly random. But each payment came with a little request for information. "What does Daddy work? What's his schedule? Any interesting visitors to the house?" She wouldn't betray her own father? For enough money, everyone has a price. Even sweet little Lana. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Lana's new clothes, her casual mentions of Dad's work schedule, her sudden interest in his past. All information that could be used against him. "She doesn't know what she's doing," Matthew said. "Of course not. She thinks she's helping a private investigator track down an old military buddy for a reunion. Very touching story, really. But tonight, she's going to learn the truth. Stay away from her." "Oh, I'm not going anywhere near her. My associates will handle that. You see, I've told them that your own daughter sent us to kill you." Imagine her horror when she realizes she led wolves to her father's door. The line went dead again. Matthew's mind raced. Dante wasn't just planning murder. He was orchestrating psychological torture. He wanted Matthew to die, knowing his daughter believed she'd caused his death. But Dante had made another mistake. He'd revealed his plan. Matthew grabbed his phone and called Lana. Straight to voicemail. He tried Christine. Same result. Panic clawed at his chest as he drove home, running red lights and weaving through traffic. He tried calling both women again and again, each unanswered ring amplifying his fear. Pulling into his driveway, Matthew noticed Christine's car was gone. A folded piece of paper was tucked under his windshield wiper. "Your wife is safe. For now. Come home alone at 10 p.m. No police, no backup, no tricks. Just you and the truth." Matthew checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. 3 hours to prepare for war. He unlocked his front door and stepped inside, immediately sensing something was wrong. The house felt different, violated. Someone had been here. In the kitchen, he found another note taped to the refrigerator. "We know where you hide your toys, devil." Your storage unit was very informative. They'd been watching him longer than he'd realized. They knew about his weapons cache, his preparations, his every move. But they didn't know everything. Matthew smiled grimly as he walked to his basement workshop. Behind a false wall, hidden even from Christine, was his real insurance policy. Weapons and equipment that weren't in any official registry. Tools that the Devil of Marseille had acquired through channels that didn't exist on paper. As he suited up in tactical gear, Matthew felt the familiar cold calm settling over him. The suburban father was gone. In his place stood a predator who'd survived countless missions in the world's darkest corners. Dante wanted to play psychological games. He was about to learn why they called Matthew Casey the Devil of Marseille. And this time, there would be no survivors to carry tales. Chapter 3. The Trap is Set. At 9:45 p.m., Matthew Casey sat in his darkened living room, appearing to wait like a helpless victim. But appearances could be deceiving. The house had been transformed into a killing field. Trip wires connected to flashbang grenades were positioned at key entry points. The stairs creaked at specific steps. He'd loosened the floorboards to create audio warnings. Motion sensors linked to his phone would alert him to any movement in the yard. He'd spent the afternoon studying his own home through the eyes of an attacker, identifying kill zones and escape routes. The Devil of Marseille had turned the suburban house into a fortress. But the real trap wasn't the house. It was Matthew himself. His phone buzzed at 9:58 p.m. "They're coming," said an unfamiliar voice. 3 men. Front door. The caller hung up before Matthew could respond, but he recognized the vocal patterns. Jerome Finley, Dante's younger brother. He'd studied the family structure years ago. Jerome bore 3 parallel scars over his left eye, courtesy of Matthew's knife during their Marseille encounter. So Jerome was feeding him intelligence. Interesting. Matthew heard the soft click of his front door lock being picked. Professional work? These weren't random thugs. He remained motionless in his chair, letting them think they had the element of surprise. The door opened silently. Footsteps on hardwood, measured and careful. Through his peripheral vision, he counted 3 figures moving with military precision. "Target acquired," whispered a voice in the darkness. They were 10 feet away when Matthew spoke without turning around. "Took you long enough." The lead man stepped forward, a blade glinting in the moonlight streaming through the window. Matthew could see the 3 parallel scars over his left eye. Jerome Finley, just as expected. "Matthew Casey," Jerome said. "You look older. 15 years will do that." Matthew slowly turned in his chair. "I have to ask, what happened to the brother I remember? The one with principles? Principles don't pay the bills. Neither does working for a monster." Jerome's jaw tightened. "Dante rebuilt us after you destroyed everything. He gave us purpose. He gave you chains. There's a difference." The 2 men flanking Jerome shifted nervously. They were younger, probably recruited locally. Disposable muscle. "Enough talk," Jerome said, raising his knife. "We have a message from your daughter." This was the moment Dante had orchestrated, the psychological blow that would shatter Matthew's will to fight. "So sad your own daughter sent us to kill you," Jerome continued, his voice lacking conviction. Matthew studied Jerome's face. Something was wrong. The man was delivering his lines, but his heart wasn't in it. The scars over his eyes seemed to twitch with inner conflict. "You don't believe that," Matthew said quietly. "Believe what?" "That Lana knew what she was doing. That she wanted me dead." Jerome's hand trembled slightly. She took the money for information she thought was harmless. Dante played her just like he's playing you." One of the younger men stepped forward impatiently. "Enough of this. Let's finish him." Jerome held up a hand. "Stand down." But Dante said, "I said stand down." The room fell silent. Matthew seized the moment. "Where is he, Jerome? Where's your brother hiding while he sends you to do his dirty work?" He's not my brother anymore." Jerome's voice cracked. "Hasn't been for years." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Matthew pressed his advantage. "Then why are you here?" "Because he has my son." The words hit like a thunderclap. Matthew's intelligence on the Finley family was 15 years old. He hadn't known about any children. "Tommy," Jerome continued, his voice breaking. He's 8 years old. Dante took him 3 days ago. Said if I don't kill you tonight, he'll... Jerome couldn't finish the sentence. He'll what? Matthew asked gently. Sell him. Just like those girls in Marseille. The two hired gunmen exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Matthew slowly stood up, his hands visible and empty. Where's Christine? Safe house downtown. She doesn't know anything. We told her there was a gas leak in the neighborhood. And Lana? Also safe. Dante wanted her alive to witness, to see what she'd caused. Matthew nodded. The trap was even more elaborate than he'd imagined. Dante had manipulated everyone. Jerome through his son, Lana through greed and deception, even these hired guns through simple lies. Here's what we're going to do, Matthew said. You're going to help me end this. One of the gunmen laughed harshly. Are you insane? We're here to kill you, not join your suicide mission. Matthew looked at Jerome. I gave your boss those scars on his chest. Tell him the devil of Marseille is here, and he can either walk out of here empty-handed, or I will carry him out in a bag. Jerome's eyes widened. These were the exact words Matthew had spoken in Marseille before he'd carved up Dante's chest. You want your son back? Matthew continued. You want to stop being Dante's puppet? Then help me, because I'm going after him tonight, with or without you. Jerome stared at him for a long moment, then slowly lowered his knife. What do you need? One of the hired guns raised his weapon. This is insane. Dante will kill us all. No, Matthew said quietly. I will. The speed of his movement caught them off guard. In 2 seconds, Matthew had closed the distance, disarmed the gunman, and put him in a chokehold. The man dropped unconscious to the floor. The second gunman aimed his pistol at Matthew's head. Don't move. Jerome stepped between them. Lower your weapon. Have you lost your mind? Maybe, but I'm getting my son back. Jerome looked at Matthew. What's the plan? Matthew smiled, the cold, predatory grin that had earned him his nickname in the darkest corners of the world. We're going to give Dante exactly what he wants. A reunion with the devil of Marseille. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming, and Matthew Casey was ready to ride it straight into hell. Chapter 4. The Devil's Gambit. The abandoned warehouse on the Portland waterfront looked like countless others. Rusted metal, broken windows, and decades of neglect. But Matthew's trained eye caught the subtle signs. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel, the glint of cameras hidden in the shadows, and the carefully casual positioning of what appeared to be homeless people who were actually armed sentries. There, Jerome pointed to a service entrance on the building's north side. Dante's using the entire complex. 3 floors, maybe 40 men total. Matthew crouched behind a shipping container, studying the target through binoculars. Weapons, mostly small arms. Few assault rifles. Dante's not expecting a frontal assault. Good, because we're not giving him one. They'd spent 2 hours planning the operation, while the unconscious gunman remained zip-tied in Matthew's basement. The surviving hired gun, a local tough named Rico, had proven surprisingly cooperative once Jerome explained that Dante was using his mother as insurance for his loyalty. My mom's in the East Wing, Rico had told them. 2nd floor, room 201. She thinks she's being protected from creditors. Now the 3 unlikely allies prepared to assault a fortress held by 40 armed criminals. On paper, it was suicide, but Matthew had faced worse odds in Afghanistan and Iraq. Remember, he told them, we're not trying to kill everyone. We're creating chaos to mask our real objectives. Rescue the hostages and eliminate Dante. Jerome, check his watch. Tommy's in Dante's private office on the 3rd floor. I saw them bring him in yesterday. And my wife. Security holding room, 1st floor. 2 guards, both distracted by poker games most nights. Matthew nodded, mentally mapping the facility. 3 objectives, 3 floors, 40 enemies. The old Matthew would have called for backup. But the devil of Marseille worked alone. There's something else, Jerome said quietly. Dante's planning to broadcast everything. He wants the world to see you beg for your family's life before he kills you. Narcissistic to the end, Matthew muttered. Then, louder, perfect. Let's give him a show he'll never forget. At 1:17 a.m., the assault began. Matthew moved through the shadows like a ghost, his black tactical gear rendering him nearly invisible. The first sentry never saw him coming. A sleeper hold dropped the man silently to the ground. Phase 1 was psychological warfare. Matthew wanted Dante to know he was here, but not where or how many he'd brought. He activated a small device that would jam cell signals while broadcasting white noise on their radio frequencies. The warehouse's electrical panel was his first stop. Instead of cutting power completely, Matthew selectively disabled circuits to create pockets of darkness throughout the building. Random lights went out, emergency exits lost their illumination, and several security cameras went dark. Inside the building, he could hear confused voices as Dante's men tried to understand what was happening. "Report," someone shouted. "East perimeter is down. Negative contact on the north side. How many are there?" Matthew smiled as he slipped through a ventilation grate into the building's first floor. Let them imagine an army in the shadows. Fear was his greatest weapon. The security holding room was exactly where Jerome had indicated. Through a window, Matthew could see Christine sitting in a chair, unharmed but clearly frightened. Two guards sat at a table, playing cards and drinking beer. Matthew attached a small explosive charge to the wall opposite the guards, then positioned himself by the door. The shaped charge would create noise and debris without causing serious injury. A distraction, not a weapon. He triggered the explosion remotely. The blast shook the building and sent the guards stumbling toward the damaged wall. Matthew entered through the unlocked door and disabled both men with precise strikes to pressure points. They'd wake up with headaches, nothing more. "Matthew!" Christine rushed into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he asked, checking her for injuries. "No, but they said Lana was involved." "That's she. She was manipulated. We'll sort it out later." He handed her a small device. "GPS tracker. Get to the parking lot and wait for my signal. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call the police. I'm not leaving without you." "Yes, you are. I need to know you're safe to do what I have to do." Christine saw something in his eyes that made her nod. She'd never seen this side of her husband. The cold professional who could plan violence with the same efficiency he planned construction projects. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Now go." As Christine slipped out through the service entrance, Matthew activated his comm link. "Jerome, status report. Second floor clear. Rico's mom is safe." "Good." Moving to Phase 2, Matthew ascended to the second floor, leaving a trail of disabled guards and sabotaged equipment. He wasn't killing anyone yet, but that would change once he reached Dante. The third floor was different. More guards, better weapons, and a palpable sense of unease. These men knew they were under attack, but they couldn't locate their enemy. Matthew found Jerome crouched behind an overturned desk, pinned down by automatic weapons fire. "Dante's got 12 men up here," Jerome called out. "They're guarding his office like Fort Knox." "Where's your son?" "Inside with Dante. I can hear him crying." Matthew's jaw tightened. Using children as shields was Dante's signature move. He'd done the same thing in Marseille. "New plan," Matthew said. "We go loud." He pulled out 2 smoke grenades and lobbed them down the hallway. As thick gray smoke filled the corridor, Matthew and Jerome advanced through the chaos. The devil of Marseille had come home. Chapter 5. Sins of the Past. Through the smoke and gunfire, Matthew moved like death incarnate. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated. He wasn't the suburban father anymore. He was the predator who'd earned his reputation in the world's darkest corners. Dante's men fired blindly into the smoke, their muzzle flashes giving away their positions. Matthew took them down one by one, using non-lethal force when possible, but showing no mercy to anyone who threatened innocent lives. "Fall back," someone screamed. "Where is he?" "I can't see anything." The smoke began to clear as Matthew and Jerome reached the final corridor leading to Dante's office. Heavy wooden doors reinforced with steel plates blocked their path. 2 guards flanked the entrance, assault rifles trained on the hallway. "Dante," Matthew called out. "Let's finish this." The doors opened slowly, revealing the man Matthew had scarred 15 years ago. Dante Finley had aged well, His blonde hair was now silver, and expensive suits had replaced military fatigues. But the 3 scars across his chest were visible through his open shirt, raised and twisted like angry snakes. "The prodigal devil returns," Dante said, his accent carrying traces of his years abroad. "You look good, Matthew. Domestic life suits you. Let the boy go." "Tommy." Dante gestured to a chair where 8-year-old Tommy Finley sat wide-eyed with terror. "He's perfectly safe. Just like those girls in Marseille were safe until you butcher my operation." Jerome took a step forward, but Matthew stopped him with a gesture. This was psychological warfare now, Dante's specialty. "Those girls were being sold like cattle," Matthew said. "They were being given opportunities. New lives, new futures. In brothels and sweatshops. You always were naive about the ways of the world." Dante circled them slowly, like a predator sizing up his prey. "Do you know what happened after you left me bleeding on those docks?" Matthew remained silent. "I spent 3 months in a Marseille hospital. 3 months watching my chest heal into this beautiful reminder of your brutality. And during those long nights, I had time to think." Dante's eyes glittered with 15 years of bottled hatred. "I realized something profound. You didn't defeat me that night. You freed me. You showed me that mercy is weakness, that honor is a luxury, that the only currency that matters is power." Is that what you tell yourself? It's what I build an empire on. Human trafficking, arms dealing, organ harvesting. Every business you despise has made me billions. And it all started with the lesson you taught me in Marseille. Jerome's hands clenched into fists. "What about Tommy? What about your nephew? What about him?" Dante's voice was ice cold. "He's leverage. Nothing more." The words hit Jerome like a physical blow. "He's family. Family is what I decide it is. And right now, this boy is worth exactly 1 devil of Marseille." Matthew studied the room layout. Large windows overlooking the river, heavy furniture for cover, and multiple exit routes. But Dante had positioned himself carefully. Any sudden movement would put Tommy in the crossfire. "What do you want?" Matthew asked. "Justice. But not the quick death you're expecting." Dante pulled out a smartphone and activated a live stream. "I want the world to watch the devil of Marseille beg for mercy." A red light appeared on the phone's camera. They were broadcasting live. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dante addressed his global audience, "you're witnessing history. The capture and execution of one of America's most decorated war criminals." "War criminal?" Matthew almost laughed. "I saved those girls. You murdered 17 of my associates in cold blood. I stopped monsters from destroying innocent lives." "Perspective," Dante shrugged. "To my viewers, you're the villain. And villains deserve punishment." He nodded to one of his remaining guards, who pressed a knife to Tommy's throat. The boy whimpered, tears streaming down his face. "Uncle Jerome," Tommy whispered, "I want to go home." Jerome's facade cracked. "I'm going to get you home, buddy. I promise." "Touching," Dante said. "But promises are like hearts, easily broken." Matthew calculated angles and distances. 3 guards plus Dante for weapons, 1 innocent child. The math was complicated by the streaming video and the need to keep Tommy alive. "You want justice?" Matthew said. "Let's do this properly. 1-on-1, like Marseille. Winner takes everything." "And why would I agree to that?" "Because you spent 15 years telling yourself you could have won that fight. Here's your chance to prove it." Dante's jaw tightened. The challenge hit its mark, his ego. "Single combat?" Dante mused. "Interesting. But what makes you think you can dictate terms?" "Because I'm not the only one in this building," Matthew lied smoothly. "My team has your entire operation surrounded. You kill that boy, and they level this place." It was pure bluff, but Dante's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Matthew pressed his advantage. "1 fight. Winner walks away. Your men stand down, the boy goes free, and we settle this like soldiers." Dante looked at his guards, then at the phone broadcasting to thousands of viewers worldwide. His narcissistic personality couldn't resist the spectacle. "Very well," he said finally. "But when I win, and I will win, I want you to confess to the world what you really are. A killer who hides behind false righteousness. And when I win, You won't. Dante handed the phone to one of his guards and began removing his suit jacket. Underneath, the 3 scars were even more prominent, raised welts that spoke of poor medical care and deliberate preservation. Your handiwork, he said, running a finger along the marks. I've kept them as a reminder. Of what? Of why you have to die. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The warehouse office had been cleared of furniture, creating an impromptu arena. Dante's remaining guards formed a circle, their weapons trained inward, not to help their boss, but to ensure no one interfered with the fight. Knives only, Dante announced to his livestream audience. Just like Marseille, Matthew drew his combat knife, the same model he'd carried for 20 years. Its weight felt familiar, almost comforting. Before we begin, Dante said, I want everyone to know the truth about Matthew Casey. He addressed the camera directly, his silver hair catching the harsh warehouse lighting. 15 years ago, this man called himself the Devil of Marseille. He claimed to be saving trafficked women and children. But the truth is, he was stealing my merchandise to sell for himself. Lies, Jerome said quietly. Was he there? Dante asked his audience. Did Jerome witness those events? No, but I did. I watched Matthew Casey execute bound prisoners, torture captured soldiers, and burn buildings full of civilians. Matthew remained silent. Defending himself would only feed Dante's narrative. And tonight, Dante continued. Justice finally arrives. The Devil of Marseille dies by the same blade that scarred me. He turned to Matthew, knife gleaming. Any last words? Just one. Matthew smiled coldly. Duck. Confusion flickered across Dante's features for a split second, long enough for the explosive charges Matthew had planted throughout the building to detonate simultaneously. The carefully timed blast sent guards sprawling and shattered every window on the 3rd floor. In the chaos, Matthew moved. But this wasn't the reckless charge Dante expected. Matthew had spent the past hour turning the building into a weapon, and now he activated his masterpiece. The charges weren't meant to kill. They were meant to create a distraction while automated systems took over. Hidden devices Matthew had placed began broadcasting white noise on police frequencies, generating false emergency calls that would flood the area with first responders in minutes. Clever, Dante admitted, regaining his footing. But it changes nothing. The 2 men circled each other in the storm-damaged office. Through broken windows, they could hear sirens approaching. Police are coming, Matthew said. Surrender now, and maybe you'll live to see trial. I don't think so. Dante lunged forward with practiced precision. He'd spent 15 years preparing for this moment, training with masters of blade combat from around the world. But Matthew had spent 15 years living a different life, one that required split-second decisions and improvised solutions. As Dante's knife swept toward his throat, Matthew grabbed a chunk of broken glass and used it to deflect the blade. The improvised parry worked, but the glass shredded Matthew's palm. Blood dripped onto the floor as the 2 fighters reset. First blood to me, Dante said. Last blood is what matters. They engaged again, this time more cautiously. Dante was skilled, but his technique was formal, the product of expensive instructors and controlled environments. Matthew's style was brutal efficiency born from countless life-or-death encounters. Jerome watched from the corner, still guarding Tommy. Come on, Matthew, he whispered. The boy looked up at his uncle with confusion. Why are they fighting? Because sometimes good people have to fight bad people to protect everyone else. Is Mr. Matthew good? Jerome looked at the man who'd scarred his brother, destroyed his family's criminal empire, and was now risking his life to save a child he'd never met. Yeah, kid. He's one of the good guys. In the center of the room, Matthew and Dante continued their deadly dance. The older man was tiring. 15 years of suburban life had softened him slightly. But Dante was slowing too, his rage making him careless. You cost me everything, Dante snarled, pressing his attack. You chose this path, Matthew replied, dodging a wild swing. In Marseille, I offered you a chance to walk away. Walk away from my life's work, from slavery, from murder, from becoming a monster. I was never a monster. Dante's composure finally cracked. I was a businessman. You sold children. I provided services to predators. Dante's rage overwhelmed his training. He charged forward with his knife raised high, a fatal error against a trained knife fighter. Matthew sidestepped the clumsy attack and drove his blade between Dante's ribs. Not a killing blow, but enough to puncture a lung and end the fight. Dante dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, blood frothing at his lips. 15 years, he gasped. 15 years I waited. Should have spent them becoming a better man, Matthew replied. Police sirens were growing louder. Through the broken windows, Matthew could see squad cars surrounding the building. Dante looked up at the phone, still broadcasting their fight. You think this makes you a hero? I think it makes me a father who protected his family. Your daughter? Dante's voice was failing. She really didn't know. She thought she was helping plan a surprise party. The admission was his final cruelty, making Matthew realize how thoroughly innocent Lana had been. But Matthew felt no satisfaction as Dante collapsed. There was only the hollow echo of an old debt finally paid. Jerome rushed to Tommy, gathering the boy in his arms. It's over, buddy. Uncle Jerome's taking you home. Is the bad man gone? Yeah, he's gone. Outside, police were setting up a perimeter and demanding surrender. Matthew looked at the phone, still broadcasting to thousands of viewers worldwide. My name is Matthew Casey, he said to the camera. 15 years ago, I stopped a human trafficking operation in Marseille, France. Tonight, I stopped it again. If you're watching this, remember, evil only wins when good people do nothing. He ended the broadcast and dropped the phone. Through the warehouse speakers, a police negotiator's voice echoed. This is the Portland police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. Matthew looked at Jerome. Ready to face the music? What about Tommy? He's going into protective custody until this sorts out. You're looking at serious charges, but testifying against Dante's organization might help. Jerome nodded. I need to make this right. You already started. As they prepared to surrender, Matthew felt the weight of 15 years lifting from his shoulders. The devil of Marseille could finally rest. He'd kept his family safe, stopped a monster, and exposed the truth to the world. It was enough. Chapter 7. Truth and Consequences. The Portland Police Bureau's interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and broken dreams. Matthew had been sitting across from Detective Sharon Burgess for 6 hours, recounting the events that led to Dante Finley's death and the dismantling of an international criminal empire. Let me get this straight, Detective Burgess said, flipping through a thick file. You're claiming this was all self-defense? I'm claiming I protected my family from a man who threatened to kill them by single-handedly assaulting a building full of armed criminals, by using the skills my country taught me to save innocent lives. Detective Burgess was a 20-year veteran with sharp eyes and graying hair. She'd seen every type of criminal Portland had to offer, but Matthew Casey didn't fit any of her usual categories. Your military record is impressive, she admitted. 3 tours, decorated veteran, honorable discharge. But that was 15 years ago. Some skills you don't forget. Apparently. She pulled out a tablet showing social media feeds. You know this whole thing was live-streamed, right? Hashtag Devil of Marseille is trending worldwide. Matthew hadn't expected that. What are people saying? Mixed reactions. Some are calling you a vigilante who belongs in prison. Others want to nominate you for sainthood. She scrolled through comments. Listen to this. Finally, someone who fights back against human traffickers. And this one, taxpayers shouldn't fund this kind of violence. I never asked to be a public figure. Well, you are now. The FBI wants to interview you about Dante's international connections. Interpol is sending agents. And there's a documentary crew in the lobby. The interrogation room door opened, and a man in an expensive suit entered. Matthew recognized him as Scott Newman, the attorney Christine had hired. Detective, I need to speak with my client. We're not finished. Yes, you are. Newman set a stack of papers on the table. District Attorney's Office just announced they're not pressing charges. Self-defense and protection of others. Case closed. Detective Burgess looked frustrated but unsurprised. The political pressure, among other things. It turns out that warehouse contained evidence of trafficking operations in 12 countries. Mr. Casey just handed law enforcement the biggest bust in Portland history. Matthew felt relief wash over him. What about Jerome? Plea deal. Testimony against Dante's organization in exchange for reduced charges. He'll do some time, but not life. And Tommy, temporary foster care with Jerome's ex-wife. She's clean, had no idea about any of this. Matthew nodded. The boy would be traumatized, but he'd have a chance at a normal life. There is one condition, Newman continued. The FBI wants your full cooperation with their investigation. Names, dates, everything you know about Dante's operations. Done. Detective Burgess stood up. You're free to go, Mr. Casey. But let me give you some advice. Being a folk hero is dangerous. You'll have people wanting to test themselves against the devil of Marseille. I'm not the devil anymore. I'm just Matthew Casey. Try telling that to the internet. Matthew walked out of the police station into a sea of camera flashes and shouted questions. The media had turned his story into a sensation, and now he was paying the price. Mr. Casey, how do you respond to critics who say you took the law into your own hands? Is it true you killed 17 people in Marseille? Will you be writing a book about your experiences? Scott Newman guided him through the crowd to a waiting car where Christine sat in the passenger seat. She looked exhausted but smiled when she saw him. How are you holding up? He asked as they drove away. I keep thinking about Lana. How she must feel knowing she was manipulated. Where is she? Safe house. FBI protection until they're sure Dante's people aren't seeking revenge. Matthew's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You made a lot of enemies tonight. Watch your back. He deleted it without showing Christine. There would be others. Dante's empire had tentacles reaching around the world, and someone would eventually try to claim the throne. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he just wanted to go home with his wife. There's something else, Christine said quietly. I've been thinking about what I saw in that warehouse. The way you move, the things you knew how to do. Chris, I'm married a construction foreman. But that's not who you really are, is it? Matthew chose his words carefully. I'm exactly who I've always been. A man who protects the people he loves, even if it means becoming someone else. Especially then. They drove through the Portland night in comfortable silence, both processing events that would change their lives forever. The suburban father and the devil of Marseille had merged into something new, a protector who could live in both worlds. As they pulled into their driveway, Matthew noticed a car parked across the street. Government plates, tinted windows. His FBI protection detail. Is this our new normal? Christine asked. For a while, until things settled down. And after that, Matthew took her hand. After that, we go back to being a family, just with better security. Christine smiled despite everything. I can live with that. Inside their house, Matthew checked every room out of habit before settling on the couch with his wife. CNN was running a special report about the warehouse raid, complete with expert commentary and analysis. The man they're calling the Devil of Marseille appears to be Matthew Casey, a decorated Army Ranger who... Christine turned off the television. I've heard enough. Me too. They sat in the darkness, holding each other as the adrenaline finally faded. Outside, the FBI watched for threats. Upstairs, an empty bedroom reminded them that their daughter was still in hiding. But they were alive, they were together, and the monster who'd threatened their family was gone forever. For Matthew Casey, that was enough. Chapter 8. Aftermath and New Beginnings. 3 months after the warehouse incident, Matthew Casey stood on the construction site of the new Portland Community Center, watching his crew install solar panels on the roof. The project had been his idea, a way to give back to the community while returning to normal life. But nothing about his life was normal anymore. Boss, called out Tony Stewart, his lead foreman. News crew's here again. Matthew sighed. Despite the district attorney's decision not to press charges, the media hadn't lost interest in the Devil of Marseille story. Documentary crews, book publishers, and movie producers contacted him weekly. Tell them I'm not available. Already did. They're setting up anyway. Through the chain-link fence, Matthew could see Antoinette Shelton, the local news reporter who'd covered his story from the beginning. She was persistent. He'd give her that. His phone buzzed. A text from Christine. Lana's coming home today. FBI says it's safe. Matthew smiled for the first time in weeks. His daughter had been in protective custody while federal agents dismantled Dante's network, but they'd finally concluded that no immediate threats remained. "Take lunch early," he told his crew. "I need to pick up my daughter." The drive to the federal building gave Matthew time to prepare for the conversation he'd been dreading. Lana blamed herself for everything that had happened, despite countless assurances that she'd been manipulated. Agent Cecilia Dickerson met him in the lobby. She was the FBI task force leader handling Dante's case, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd become something of an ally. "She's doing better," Agent Dickerson said as they walked to the secure elevator. "The counselor says she's processing the trauma appropriately." "What about charges?" "None. She was an unwitting accomplice at worst, and the information she provided was largely useless." "Try telling her that." "I have. Multiple times." The safe house was a nondescript apartment overlooking the Willamette River. Lana sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window with hollow eyes that made Matthew's heart ache. "Hey, sweetheart." She turned, and for a moment, Matthew saw his little girl again. Then reality crashed back. "Dad." Her voice was flat. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Matthew sat beside her and pulled her into a hug. "You have nothing to apologize for. I led them to you. I gave them information. You helped a man you thought was planning a surprise reunion. You couldn't have known his real intentions. But I should have seen through it. The money, the questions." "Lana." Matthew's voice was firm. "You were targeted by professionals who've been manipulating people for decades. They played on your financial stress and your desire to help. That doesn't make you responsible for their crimes." Agent Dickerson handed him a file. "Speaking of their crimes, we've identified operations in 17 countries. Your daughter's information helped us understand their recruitment methods." "See," Matthew told Lana. "You actually helped stop them." But Lana wasn't consoled. "I watched the live stream, Dad. I saw what you had to do because of my mistakes." Matthew had wondered when this conversation would come. The warehouse fight had been broadcast to thousands of viewers before the signal was cut. "What did you see?" "I saw you become someone else. Someone dangerous. I became someone who could protect his family. By killing people. By stopping people who sold children into slavery." They sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, downtown Portland bustled with normal life. People going to work, running errands, living without fear of international criminal organizations. "I've been thinking about changing schools," Lana said quietly. "Maybe transferring somewhere far away. Running won't help." "How would you know?" "Because I tried it for 15 years. I thought I could bury my past and live a quiet life. But the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for the right moment to surface." "So what do I do?" "You accept that good people sometimes find themselves in impossible situations. You learn from what happened, and you move forward." Agent Dickerson checked her watch. "We should go. The media has been tracking your movements, and we'd like to get Lana home before they figure out where she's been staying." The drive home was quiet, with Lana staring out the window as they passed familiar neighborhoods. Portland looked the same, but Matthew knew his daughter was seeing it differently now, as a place where violence could erupt without warning. "Will it ever feel normal again?" she asked. "Yes, but it'll be a different kind of normal." They pulled into their driveway to find Christine waiting on the front porch. The reunion was tearful but subdued. Too much had happened for simple relief. Inside, Matthew noticed the changes Christine had made. A new security system, reinforced doors, and blackout curtains that could provide concealment if needed. She'd adapted to their new reality with characteristic pragmatism. "Dinner in an hour," Christine announced. "I made your favorite lasagna." As Lana headed upstairs to her room, Matthew caught his wife's hand. "How are you really doing?" "Honestly, I'm angry. At me, at the situation, at Dante for targeting our family, at the world for being a place where people like him exist. I'm sorry." "Don't." Christine's voice was sharp. "Don't apologize for protecting us. Don't apologize for being exactly who you needed to be when we needed you most." That evening, they tried to have a normal family dinner, but the conversation was stilted, punctuated by long silences and careful avoidance of recent events. Lana picked at her food. Are people going to stare at me when I go back to school? Probably, Matthew admitted. But it'll pass. Everything does. I don't want to be known as the girl whose dad is the devil of Marseille. You're known as the daughter of a man who loves his family enough to fight for them. After dinner, Matthew went to his home office to review the latest batch of interview requests. Publishers wanted him to write a memoir. Hollywood producers wanted to option his story. International security firms wanted to hire him as a consultant. He deleted them all, but one email caught his attention. It was from Jerome Finley, writing from federal prison. Anything. Matthew, I wanted to thank you for saving Tommy. The boy asks about you sometimes. He calls you the good soldier. I know we can never be friends after everything that happened, but I wanted you to know that testifying against Dante's network has given my life meaning for the first time in years. Maybe that's justice. Matthew closed the laptop and found Christine reading in their bedroom. What are you thinking about? She asked. The future. What comes next? What do you want to come next? Matthew considered the question. For 15 years, he tried to forget who he'd been. Now he knew that was impossible, but maybe it was also unnecessary. I want to finish that community center. I want to help Lana get through college. I want to grow old with you. And if the past comes calling again, then I'll handle it. But this time, I won't try to do it alone. Christine smiled and moved closer to him on the bed. Promise me something. No more secrets. If danger comes looking for us, we face it together. Promise. Outside their bedroom window, the FBI protection detail maintained its quiet vigil. In a few months, they'd be withdrawn, and the Casey family would face whatever came next on their own. But they'd face it together, stronger for having survived their ordeal. The Devil of Marseille had come home. Chapter 9. The Devil's Legacy. 1 year later, Matthew Casey stood before a crowd of 500 people at the grand opening of the Portland Community Center. The building behind him gleamed in the afternoon sun. 3 stories of glass and steel dedicated to education, job training, and support services for at-risk youth. This center represents something important, he told the assembled crowd, which included city officials, community leaders, and dozens of reporters. It represents the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. In the front row, Christine and Lana sat with proud smiles. His daughter had returned to Portland State, where she was studying social work with a focus on helping trafficking victims. The media attention had initially been overwhelming, but she'd learned to channel her experience into something positive. I'd like to recognize some special guests, Matthew continued. Jerome Finley, recently released from federal custody, who provided testimony that led to the conviction of over 300 criminals worldwide. Jerome stood briefly, acknowledging the polite applause. He'd aged during his 8 months in prison, but his eyes held a clarity that had been missing for years. Beside him sat Tommy, now 9 years old and showing no obvious signs of trauma from his ordeal. And Agent Cecilia Dickerson of the FBI, whose task force has rescued over 800 victims of human trafficking using intelligence gathered from the Finley investigation. The agent nodded professionally. She'd become something of a friend to the Casey family, often stopping by for dinner when her cases brought her to Portland. But mostly, Matthew said, this center exists because of the volunteers who make it possible. Teachers, counselors, job trainers, and mentors who believe that everyone deserves help when they need it most. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began touring the facility, Matthew was approached by a young woman with short black hair and nervous eyes. Mr. Casey? I'm Nina Jimenez. I was one of the girls you saved in Marseille. Matthew's breath caught. He'd never met any of the trafficking victims from that night 15 years ago. I've been following your story in the news, she continued. I wanted to thank you, not just for that night, but for showing the world that someone was willing to fight for us. How are you doing? I'm a social worker now, in Los Angeles. I help other survivors rebuild their lives. She smiled. I guess you could say you inspired me. As Nina walked away, Matthew felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Emmanuel Miles, the FBI's regional director. Matthew, we need to talk. They walked to a quiet corner of the community center's lobby. What's on your mind? We've received intelligence about a new trafficking network. Bigger than Dante's operation. More sophisticated. Matthew's jaw tightened. And They're specifically targeting families of law enforcement and military personnel. They want revenge for what happened to Dante. Who's leading it? Clifton Mays. He was Dante's lieutenant in Eastern Europe. Very smart, very dangerous. What does this have to do with me? They put a bounty on your family. $2 million for your daughter, $1 million for your wife. They want you to suffer before they kill you. Matthew felt the familiar cold rage building in his chest. Protection detail? Already in place. But this isn't going to end with passive security, and we both know it. Through the lobby windows, Matthew could see Christine and Lana talking with community center volunteers. They looked happy, peaceful, normal. What are you asking me to do? Help us end this. Not as a vigilante, as a consultant. Official channels, proper oversight. You want me to go after Mays. I want you to do what you do best. Protect innocent people from monsters. Matthew considered the offer. A year ago, he would have refused. He'd wanted nothing more than to live quietly with his family. But the past year had taught him something important. He couldn't escape who he was, but he could choose how to use his skills. I'll need full immunity for any actions taken in pursuit of this mission. Already arranged. And if I do this, it has to be completely separate from my family life. They don't know. They don't participate. They stay protected. Understood. One more thing. When this is over, when Mays and his network are finished, I'm done. No more missions. No more Devil of Marseille. I'll become a full-time father and husband. Deal. They shook hands as the community center celebration continued around them. That evening, over dinner, Matthew made a decision that would have been impossible a year earlier. I need to tell you both something, he said to Christine and Lana. The FBI has asked for my help with another case. Christine set down her fork. What kind of case? The kind that requires my particular skills. Dad, Lana said quietly, you don't have to do this to make up for what happened. We're safe now. That's exactly why I have to do it. Because other families aren't safe, and I can help change that. Christine reached across the table and took his hand. How dangerous? Dangerous enough. But this time, I won't be going in alone. I'll have backup, support, resources. And after this case, I retire from that world completely. I become a full-time community center director and family man. Lana smiled. You mean you become boring? The most boring man in Portland. I can live with that, Christine said. But you come home, Matthew. No matter what it takes, you come home. I promise. 2 weeks later, Matthew Casey boarded a plane to Romania, where Clifton Mays was reportedly operating his newest trafficking hub. But he wasn't traveling as the Devil of Marseille anymore. He was traveling as Agent Matthew Casey, FBI consultant, with full federal authority and a team of elite operators at his back. The suburban father had finally found a way to merge his two worlds, protection and justice, family and duty, the man he'd been and the man he'd become. In his carry-on bag was a photo of Christine and Lana at the community center opening, smiling and proud. It was his reminder of what he was fighting for. As the plane lifted off, Matthew looked out the window at Portland, growing smaller below. Somewhere in the city, his family was safe, his community center was helping people rebuild their lives, and the future was bright with possibility. The Devil of Marseille was going hunting one last time. But this time, he was hunting for all the right reasons. Epilogue. 6 months later, Matthew Casey sat on his back porch, watching Lana practice her graduation speech for Portland State. She would be the first in her class to receive a degree in social work with a specialization in human trafficking recovery, a program the university had created specifically because of her advocacy. The Mays operation had been dismantled in 48 hours across 12 countries. No civilians were harmed. Over 400 victims were rescued, and Clifton Mays died while resisting arrest in a Bucharest warehouse. The news had barely covered it. Just another international police operation in a world full of violence, which was exactly how Matthew preferred it. How's the speech coming? He called out. Good. I'm talking about how crisis can become purpose. That's a good message. Christine emerged from the house, carrying 3 glasses of lemonade. The community center called. They want to expand the job training program. We'll need more funding. Already got it. Turns out there are a lot of wealthy people who want to support a project run by the Devil of Marseille. Matthew winced. The nickname had stuck, despite his efforts to shed it. "I prefer community center director," he said. "You can call yourself whatever you want," Christine replied, settling beside him. "But to a lot of people, you'll always be the man who fought monsters to protect innocent people. Is that such a bad thing?" Lana asked, looking up from her notes. "No," Matthew admitted. "I guess it's not." As the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Matthew Casey reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. He tried to bury his past, only to learn that the past never really goes away. It just waits for the right moment to resurface. But he'd also learned that the past doesn't have to define the future. It can inform it, guide it, even strengthen it. The Devil of Marseille would always be part of who he was. But Matthew Casey, husband, father, community leader, was who he chose to be. And that choice made all the difference. In the distance, a police siren wailed, racing towards some emergency in the night. Matthew listened for a moment, then turned back to his family. Someone else could handle whatever crisis was unfolding in the city. His war was over. Finally, truly over. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Quiet Life. Rodney Klein had built his farm with his own hands, every fence post driven deep into the Missouri soil like the promises he'd once made. The morning mist clung to his cornfields as he walked the perimeter, checking for damage from the storm that had rolled through the night before. At 52, his body still carried the discipline of his military years, broad shoulders squared, eyes constantly scanning, movements economical and purposeful. 25 years ago, he'd returned from 3 tours in Afghanistan with skills no farmer should need and memories that visited him in the dark hours before dawn. He'd met Nancy McCall at a veteran support group, where she volunteered serving coffee and offering kind words. She had flowing auburn hair and a smile that seemed to promise peace. They married within a year, and Tim came along 2 years later. The farm had been their sanctuary. 600 acres of corn, soybeans, and cattle, far enough from town that the only sounds were wind through wheat and the distant lowing of cattle. Rodney had taught himself to find solace in the rhythm of seasons, in the honest work of coaxing life from earth. But lately, Nancy had been different. Phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered rooms. Weekend trips to visit her sister Virginia Kelly in Kansas City that stretched longer each time. The way she flinched when he touched her shoulder, as if his calloused hands had become foreign to her skin. This morning, she was already gone when he woke. A note on the kitchen counter went to Virginia's early. Back Sunday. N. No love, no miss you. Just her initial, like signing a business document. Rodney crushed the note in his fist, then smoothed it out and placed it in his pocket. In Afghanistan, the smallest details often meant the difference between life and death. A moved stone, a different route, a conversation that stopped too quickly when you approached. He learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming. His phone buzzed. Tim, his 23-year-old son, who worked construction in Springfield. Hey, Dad, just checking in. Mom around? She's at Aunt Virginia's. You need something? A pause. Too long. Nah, just wanted to talk to her about something. I'll call her cell. Tim hung up before Rodney could respond. Another detail. Another wrong note in a symphony that had been playing off-key for months. Rodney walked to his workshop, a converted barn where he maintained his equipment. But instead of reaching for his tools, he opened a locked cabinet hidden behind an old workbench. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were items from another life. Night vision goggles, tactical knives, surveillance equipment, and a Glock 19 that had never been registered in civilian databases. He'd hoped never to touch these things again. But as he unwrapped the portable GPS tracker, military grade, undetectable, he felt the cold certainty of a man who'd been played for a fool settling into his bones. Nancy's car would tell him everything he needed to know. That night, Under cover of darkness, Rodney attached the tracker to the undercarriage of Nancy's Honda Accord. Then he waited, watching the blinking dot on his laptop screen like a sniper watching a target. She wasn't in Kansas City. She was 20 miles south at the Sunrise Motel on Route 44. The same location she'd been visiting for the past 3 months, according to the data. Always the same room. Always the same duration. Rodney felt something cold and familiar awakening in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had in Kandahar when he'd discovered his translator, a man he'd trusted with his life, had been feeding information to the Taliban. The same ice-water calm that had preceded some of his darkest moments overseas. He'd given Nancy and Tim everything. His loyalty, his protection, his love. In return, they'd handed him betrayal wrapped in smiles and lies. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten what he was capable of when pushed too far. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The Sunrise Motel squatted on Route 44 like a diseased animal, its neon sign missing half its letters. Rodney positioned himself in the tree line across the parking lot, using the night vision scope he'd zeroed in on Taliban positions 15 years ago. Room 18. Nancy's Honda was parked next to a black Ford F-150 he didn't recognize. Through the scope, he watched shadows move behind the thin curtains. 2 figures. Intimate. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding in real time through military-grade optics. Rodney photographed the license plate. Missouri tags, registered to Mark Bates. The name hit him like a physical blow. Mark Bates, Nancy's book club friend, she'd mentioned casually over dinner. The divorce contractor who'd helped them repair storm damage to their barn last spring. The man who'd shaken Rodney's hand and looked him in the eye while planning to steal his wife. Rodney remembered every interaction now with painful clarity. Mark's lingering glances at Nancy. The way she'd brighten when his truck appeared in their driveway. The private jokes that excluded Rodney. How had he missed it? How had a man trained to spot deception been deceived in his own home? The answer came as he watched Nancy emerge from the room, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled. She wasn't the same woman who'd served coffee to broken veterans. This Nancy moved with a guilty confidence, checking her phone as Mark's hands roamed her body one final time before she got in her car. Rodney followed Nancy's Honda at a distance, his headlights off, relying on the night vision equipment to navigate. She drove not toward Kansas City, but to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Springfield. Inside, she met Virginia Kelly, but this wasn't a sisterly coffee date. Through the diner's windows, Rodney watched Nancy hand Virginia an envelope. Virginia counted what appeared to be cash, then slid a small device across the table. Even from his position, Rodney recognized it. A GPS jammer, military surplus, the kind used to block tracking devices. His own wife was not just cheating, she was planning. The weekend trips to Virginia's had been cover for something larger. The book club, the sister visits, the gradual emotional distance, all of it was orchestrated. But planned for what? Rodney's phone buzzed. A text from Nancy, staying extra night with Virginia. Her water heater broke. Love you. The casual cruelty of the lie made his jaw clench. But it was the GPS jammer that turned his blood to ice water. Nancy knew about surveillance. Someone had taught her counter-surveillance techniques. Someone had prepared her for the possibility that her husband might investigate, which meant they knew who he really was, what he was capable of. Rodney drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, his mind cataloging facts like ammunition. Mark Bates wasn't just Nancy's lover. He was her accomplice in something larger. Virginia Kelly wasn't just providing an alibi. She was providing equipment and expertise. Tim's phone call wasn't casual concern. It was coordination. Back at the farm, Rodney sat in his kitchen as the sun rose, staring at the cold coffee Nancy had made yesterday morning. The last coffee she'd ever make in this house. His phone rang. Tim, Dad? Just want to let you know I might be stopping by the farm this weekend. Got some friends who want to see the place. Friends? Yeah, just some guys from work. We might camp out in the south pasture if that's okay. The south pasture, the most isolated part of the property, invisible from the main road, surrounded by dense woods. The perfect place for something to happen without witnesses. Sure, son. You know you're always welcome. After hanging up, Rodney walked to his workshop and unlocked the cabinet again. This time, he removed everything. Night vision goggles, tactical knives, zip ties, surveillance equipment, and enough C4 plastic explosive to turn the Sunrise Motel into a crater. They wanted to play games with a retired farmer. But they'd forgotten that Farmer had spent 3 tours teaching insurgents the cost of betrayal. Nancy had chosen her side. Tim had chosen his side. Mark Bates had signed his own death warrant the moment he decided to steal from a man who'd killed for less. Now Rodney would teach them all the same lesson he'd taught the Taliban. When you betray Rodney Klein, you don't get to walk away. Chapter 3. The Attack. Rodney spent Friday preparing his farm like a battlefield. He knew they were coming. Tim's camping trip was scheduled for Saturday night, and Nancy was conveniently extending her stay with Virginia until Sunday. The coordination was obvious to a man trained to recognize enemy movement patterns. He disabled the motion sensors on his security system and replaced them with military-grade proximity alarms linked to his phone. He mapped sightlines and choke points around his property. Most importantly, he positioned caches of weapons and equipment at strategic locations. The workshop, the main house, the old silo, and the tree line overlooking the south pasture. As the sun set Saturday, Rodney positioned himself in the workshop with a clear view of the access road. Through his night vision scope, he watched a black van approach with its headlights off. Professional. These weren't Tim's construction buddies. These were contractors, the kind Mark Bates might know from his shadier business connections. 4 men exited the van near the south pasture. Rodney recognized the tactical formation, the way they moved in coordinated silence. Military training, but recent, probably former Marines or Army, the kind who'd learned their skills in Iraq or Afghanistan and then found civilian applications for violence. His phone buzzed with a proximity alarm from the main house. A 5th man was approaching from the north, heading toward the electrical panel. They planned to cut his power and then hit him in the darkness, probably making it look like a home invasion gone wrong. Rodney smiled grimly. They'd done their homework, but not well enough. They knew he was former military, but they didn't know the specifics. They'd planned for a standard veteran, not someone who'd spent 3 tours running classified operations behind enemy lines. Time to educate them. Rodney used his phone to trigger the hidden charges he'd placed on his own electrical panel. The explosion was small but spectacular, sending sparks into the night and plunging the farm into darkness. From their perspective, their man had successfully cut the power. But Rodney's night vision equipment didn't need electricity. He moved through his own property like a ghost, using terrain he knew better than his own heartbeat. The first man he found was the one who'd approached the electrical panel, now moving toward the main house with an assault rifle. Rodney dropped him with a blade between the ribs, quick and silent, before the man knew death had found him. 3 left in the south pasture, 1 near the house. Rodney circled wide, using the tree line to approach the south group from their blind side. They were advancing on the main house in a wedge formation, expecting to catch a sleeping farmer by surprise. Instead, they walked into an ambush that would have made his old unit proud. The first man screamed when Rodney's knife found his kidney. The sound carried across the pasture, and his companions spun toward the noise, their night vision goggles reflecting infrared light like animal eyes. But Rodney was already gone, melted back into darkness. Contact! Contact! One of them shouted into a radio. We've got contact! They regrouped, backs to each other, scanning the darkness. Professional but panicked. They'd expected an easy target, not a nightmare that moved like smoke and struck like lightning. Rodney took the second man with a throwing knife to the throat, the blade spinning through darkness with lethal precision. The man dropped his weapon and clutched his neck, blood streaming through his fingers as he drowned in his own blood. 2 left, and they were breaking. This is fucked, one of them screamed. This isn't some farmer. We need to extract. But they made one crucial mistake. They parked their van at the end of a dead-end road, and Rodney controlled the only exit. The third man never saw the boot that shattered his kneecap, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Rodney was on him before he could scream, zip-tying his hands behind his back with movements practiced in a dozen interrogation sites across the Middle East. The last man, young, maybe 25, probably thinking this was easy money, found himself alone in the darkness with something that wasn't quite human anymore. "Please," he whispered when Rodney appeared behind him like death itself. "Please, I got kids." "So did the Taliban," Rodney replied, breaking the man's fingers one by one until he screamed everything he knew. Mark Bates had hired them through a contact in Kansas City. The job was simple: kill Rodney Klein and make it look like a robbery. Nancy would inherit the farm and the life insurance, then disappear with Mark to start over somewhere else. Tim was in on it. He provided the property layout and confirmed Rodney's schedule. But the man's final confession was the blade that cut deepest. "Your wife, she said you deserved it. Said you were a cold bastard who never loved anyone properly. Said the world would be better without you." Rodney left the man zip-tied in the south pasture and walked to the main house, where the fourth attacker was waiting. This one was smarter. He'd heard the screaming and positioned himself defensively. But patience was Rodney's greatest weapon. He waited until the man's nerves shattered, then took him alive as well. By dawn, 3 men were dead and 2 were secured in Rodney's workshop, ready for interrogation. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Nancy and 4 from Tim. He ignored them all and dialed a different number. "Mark Bates? This is Rodney Klein. I think you, and I need to talk." "Rodney, thank God you're okay. I heard there was some kind of trouble at your farm. They sent 4 men to burn my farm." Rodney interrupted, his voice deadly calm. "They thought I was a retired farmer. They didn't know I trained men to kill in Afghanistan. I cut the power. One by one, they screamed. I broke the last man's fingers to make him talk. He whispered a name, my ex-wife's." The line went silent, except for Mark's ragged breathing. "You have 1 hour to bring Nancy to the Sunrise Motel," Rodney continued. "Room 18. Come alone, or I start sending pieces of your hired guns to every contractor in the state. And Mark, bring a shovel. You're going to need it." Chapter 4. The Hunt. Mark Bates sat in his truck outside the Sunrise Motel, hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. Nancy was beside him, her face pale as winter, clutching a phone that had been buzzing nonstop with unanswered calls to Tim. "He knows," she whispered. "Jesus Christ, Mark, he knows everything." "We stick to the plan," Mark said, though his voice cracked on the words. "Those guys were supposed to be professionals." "How did—" "You don't understand," Nancy interrupted. "I lived with him for 25 years. I watched him wake up screaming from nightmares he wouldn't talk about. I found the commendations hidden in his workshop: Purple Heart, Bronze Star, citations I couldn't even pronounce. Rodney wasn't just military, Mark. He was something else." Mark wiped sweat from his forehead. "We can still salvage this. We tell him it was my idea, that I manipulated you. He won't care." Nancy's voice was hollow. "Rodney doesn't forgive betrayal. Ever. He told me once about a translator in Afghanistan who sold information to the Taliban. Rodney found him tied to a chair in a basement in Kandahar, missing everything from the waist down. He walked away and let the man bleed out." Mark stared at her. "You never told me that. There's a lot I never told you. Like the fact that he has enough plastic explosive in his workshop to level half the county. Like the fact that he speaks 4 languages and knows how to make people disappear." A knock on the passenger window made them both jump. Through the glass, they saw a figure in dark clothing holding a phone with a timer counting down from 60 seconds. Mark rolled down the window with trembling hands. "You're late," Rodney said calmly. Room 18. Now, inside the motel room, the stench of fear and stale sex hung in the air. Rodney had transformed the space into an interrogation chamber. Chairs positioned strategically, duct tape and zip ties arranged on the bedside table like surgical instruments. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to 2 chairs he'd placed facing each other. Nancy and Mark complied, their movements jerky with terror. Rodney remained standing, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. 25 years, he began, his voice conversational. 25 years, I gave you everything, Nancy. Protection, loyalty, love. And you." He gestured to Mark. "I shook your hand, welcomed you into my home, fed you at my table." "Rodney, please," Nancy started. "I'm not finished." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I want to understand the timeline. When did this start? Mark and Nancy exchanged glances. Neither spoke. Rodney pulled out his phone and showed them a video. On the screen, they could see the workshop where two zip-tied men sat bleeding from various wounds. I've been questioning your hired help, Rodney explained. They've been very cooperative, but I prefer to hear it from you. 2 years, Nancy whispered finally. It started 2 years ago. The Barnes wedding, Mark added quickly. We met at the Barnes wedding reception. Started as just talking then. Then you decided my wife was worth stealing, Rodney finished. And my farm. And my life insurance. How much, Nancy? How much was I worth dead? Nancy's composure cracked. It wasn't about money. You think you came back from Afghanistan the same person? You think 25 years of living with a ghost was easy? You never talked, never shared, never let me in. You were like living with a beautiful corpse. So you decided to make me an actual corpse. Mark, offer me a life, she screamed. A real life with someone who could actually feel something. Someone who didn't wake up every night checking windows and doors like the Taliban were coming through them. Rodney nodded slowly. And Tim? When did you recruit my son? The question hung in the air like smoke. Nancy's face crumpled. 6 months ago, she admitted. Mark convinced him that you were dangerous. That you might hurt us if you found out. Tim was scared, Rodney. He was protecting me. By helping to kill his father. By helping me escape a marriage that was already dead. Rodney pulled out a second phone and dialed number. Tim, your mother would like to speak with you. He put the phone on speaker. Mom. Tim's voice was tight with panic. Are you okay? I've been calling. I'm fine, Nancy said quickly. Everything's fine. Are you? Did you get to the farm? Yeah, I'm here now. Mom, there's blood everywhere. And Dad's truck is gone. What happened to those guys? They were supposed to... Tim, Rodney interrupted quietly. This is your father. The line went silent. I drove to her apartment, Rodney continued, his voice still calm, but carrying the weight of absolute judgment. Found blood on the door. Her phone on the floor. A voicemail from my son. Dad, you made a grave mistake. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Dad. Tim's voice was barely a whisper. Dad, I can explain. No need, son. I understand perfectly. You chose sides. Just like your mother. Just like Mark here. Rodney ended the call and pocketed the phone. Now, he said, turning back to Nancy and Mark, let's discuss the consequences of your choices. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Rodney drove Nancy and Mark to an abandoned grain elevator on the edge of his property, a structure that hadn't been used in decades. The interior was a cathedral of rust and shadows, with shafts of moonlight cutting through broken windows like silver blades. He'd prepared the space earlier. Chains hanging from support beams, a table with various tools arranged with surgical precision, and a hole in the concrete floor that dropped into an old grain pit. Strip, he commanded, his voice echoing in the empty space. Rodney, please, Nancy began. Strip, or I start removing fingers. They complied with shaking hands. Rodney zip-tied them to the chains, leaving them suspended facing each other in the center of the space. I want to tell you a story, Rodney began, walking slowly around them. It's about a village outside Kandahar where the Taliban was recruiting children. My unit was tasked with eliminating the recruitment cell, but when we got there, we found something interesting. He paused behind Mark, close enough that his breath stirred the man's hair. The cell leader was an American contractor, former Green Beret who'd gone native, turned his training against his own country. You know what he told me when I asked him why? Neither responded. He said loyalty was for suckers. Said the real money was in playing all sides. Sound familiar? Rodney moved to a portable radio and tuned it to a news station. The evening report was just beginning. Authorities are investigating the disappearance of 4 men from Kansas City who were last seen heading toward rural Missouri. Police have also issued a bolo alert for Mark Bates, a local contractor wanted for questioning in connection with an apparent home invasion. Ow! Mark gasped. I called in myself, Rodney explained. Told them I fought off 4 armed intruders and that my wife's friend Mark Bates had been acting strangely lately. Mentioned that Tim seemed scared of something but wouldn't say what. By now, they've found the bodies I left at strategic locations around the county. He turned off the radio and faced them directly. Here's what's going to happen. Nancy, you're going to call Virginia and tell her to come to the farm immediately. Tell her there's been an emergency and you need her help. I won't. Rodney picked up a pair of bolt cutters from his tool table. Mark, hold out your hand. No, I'll call her. Nancy screamed. 20 minutes later, Virginia Kelly's sedan was pulling into the Klein driveway. Rodney watched through binoculars as she parked and walked toward the main house, carrying what appeared to be a large duffel bag. GPS jammers, burner phones, and a clean car, Rodney murmured. Virginia's not just your sister, Nancy. She's your extraction specialist. He spoke into a radio clipped to his collar. Tim, your Aunt Virginia just arrived. Bring her to the grain elevator. Use the north entrance. Dad, I don't want to. Son, you're in this now whether you want to be or not. The only question is whether you're smart enough to cut a deal. 30 minutes later, Tim appeared at the grain elevator leading a zip-tied Virginia Kelly. His face was ashen, his hands shaking. Well, Rodney said, surveying his assembled family. The gang's all here. He'd positioned them in a circle. Nancy and Mark suspended from their chains, Virginia and Tim forced to their knees facing inward. A family meeting with a difference. Before we conclude tonight's festivities, Rodney announced, I want everyone to understand exactly what you've cost me. Not just money or property, but something far more valuable, my ability to trust the people I love. He pulled out a knife with a 7-inch blade. Tim, you're going to choose. Your mother or your aunt. One of them leaves here alive to tell the story. The other stays to feed the grain rats. Dad, please. Choose, or I kill them both and make you watch. Tim looked between his mother and aunt, tears streaming down his face. I can't. Then let me make it easier, Rodney said. He walked to Virginia and pressed the knife to her throat. Virginia's been planning this for years, haven't you? The perfect crime, kill the scary veteran and ride off into the sunset with his wife and money. Virginia's eyes blazed with defiance. You were destroying her. Nancy was withering away married to a machine. Interesting perspective. Rodney drew a thin line of blood across her throat. Here's mine. You taught my wife to betray me, helped her recruit my son, and try to have me murdered in my own home. He stepped back and addressed the group. Here's what's going to happen. Nancy, Mark, and Virginia are going to disappear tonight. Permanently. Tim gets to live, but he's going to help me clean up this mess, and then he's going to disappear too. Not dead, just gone. New identity, new life, far away from here. And if I refuse? Tim asked quietly. Rodney smiled, and for the first time since the ordeal began, it reached his eyes. Then you'll discover exactly why they called me the Kandahar Ghost. Chapter 6. The Preparation. Dawn was breaking over the grain elevator when Rodney finished his work. Virginia Kelly would never manipulate another family. Mark Bates would never steal another man's wife. Nancy would never betray another husband's trust. Tim sat in the corner, having watched his father dismantle his mother's conspiracy with the efficiency of a surgeon removing cancer. The boy had stopped crying somewhere around midnight, his face now wearing the hollow expression of someone who'd seen too much. Get up, Rodney commanded. We have work to do. Over the next 6 hours, they cleaned the grain elevator until no trace remained of what had transpired there. Rodney had learned industrial-grade cleanup techniques in Afghanistan. How to make people vanish without a trace, how to sanitize a site so thoroughly that forensics would find nothing. The bodies went into the grain pit, which Rodney then sealed with industrial concrete. The blood was neutralized with chemicals that broke down DNA. Every surface was scrubbed with solutions that would defeat luminol testing. Dad, Tim said as they loaded the last of the cleaning supplies into Rodney's truck. Are you going to kill me too? Rodney studied his son, really looked at him for the first time in months. Tim had Nancy's eyes, but Rodney's jawline. There was potential there, hidden beneath the weakness that Nancy had cultivated. No, Rodney said finally. You're going to live. But the Tim Klein who helped plan his father's murder dies today. The question is, what kind of man do you want to become? That afternoon, Rodney drove Tim to a bus station 3 counties away. Before Tim boarded, Rodney handed him an envelope containing $10,000 in cash and a driver's license bearing the name Timothy Blake. "There's a man in Denver named Santos Stewart," Rodney explained. "Former Marine, runs a construction company. He owes me a favor. Call this number when you get there. He'll give you work and help you start over." Tim stared at the documents. "Why?" "Because you're my son. Because you were scared and manipulated by people who should have protected you. Because everyone deserves one chance to choose who they really are. What if I come back? What if I tell someone what happened?" Rodney's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Then you'll discover that my capacity for mercy has limits." Tim boarded the bus without looking back. Rodney returned to his farm that evening and sat on his porch, watching the sun set over fields that were finally his again. His phone rang. Area code 816, Kansas City. "Hello, Mr. Klein? This is Detective Brennan with KCPD. We're investigating the disappearance of several individuals who may have been heading to your area. I was wondering if we could ask you a few questions." "Of course, Detective. I've been worried sick about my wife, Nancy. She was visiting her sister Virginia in Kansas City and hasn't returned my calls." "When did you last speak with her?" "Friday evening. She said she was extending her visit to help Virginia with some home repairs. I've been calling all weekend, but getting voicemail." "And you haven't seen Mark Bates recently?" "Mark? He helped us with some barn repairs a few months ago. Nice fellow. Is he missing too?" The detective asked several more questions, all of which Rodney answered with the confused concern of a worried husband. When the call ended, he deleted the number and powered down the phone. Inside the house, he walked through rooms that still smelled faintly of Nancy's perfume. 25 years of marriage reduced to abandoned coffee cups and unread magazines. Photos on the mantel showed happier times. Wedding day, Tim's graduation, family vacations where everyone smiled at the camera. Rodney gathered every photo containing Nancy, Mark, or Virginia and fed them into the fireplace. The flames consumed faces and memories with equal hunger, leaving only ashes and the acrid smell of burning plastic. But he kept one photo, Tim at age 8, holding up a fish he'd caught in their pond, grinning with gap-toothed pride. That boy had been innocent. That boy had deserved better than being raised as a pawn in his mother's game. Maybe Timothy Blake would be better than Tim Klein had been. Rodney sat in his chair and opened a bottle of bourbon. The good stuff Nancy had always said was too expensive for daily drinking. As the liquor burned his throat, he considered the future. The farm was his again, but it felt hollow now, like a house with all the furniture removed. Perhaps it was time for Rodney Klein to disappear as well. The Kandahar ghost had unfinished business in other places, with other people who thought betrayal came without consequences. But first, he had one more call to make. Chapter 7, The Invitation. 1 month later, Detective Colleen Brennan sat across from Rodney Klein in the kitchen of his farmhouse, her notebook open on the table between them. She was in her 40s, gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, the kind of cop who'd seen enough evil to recognize it in others. "Mr. Klein, I have to ask, aren't you concerned about your wife? It's been 4 weeks since anyone's seen Nancy, Virginia Kelly, or Mark Bates. They've essentially vanished." Rodney poured coffee into 2 cups, his movements steady and unhurried. "Detective, I've been married to Nancy for 25 years. She's independent. Sometimes she needs space to work through things." "What kind of things?" "Our marriage hasn't been easy lately. I think she was questioning whether she wanted to stay on the farm, whether she wanted to stay married. Nancy's the kind of woman who might disappear for a while to figure out what she wants." Detective Brennan studied his face. "And you're okay with that?" "I love my wife, Detective. If she needs time and space to find herself, I'll give her that, even if it means I never see her again." The detective made notes, but Rodney could see the doubt in her eyes. She was good, better than the local sheriff who'd initially handled the case. She'd noticed things. The way Rodney's story was too perfect, too emotionally detached. The fact that his cell phone records showed no attempts to contact Nancy after Friday evening. The complete absence of any financial activity on the missing person's credit cards or bank accounts. "Mr. Klein, what did you do in the military?" "I was in the Army. 3 tours in Afghanistan." "What was your MLS?" Your military specialty? Rodney smiled slightly. Infantry. Nothing fancy. Another note. Another lie cataloged. Detective Brennan knew better. She'd run his military records and found mostly redacted files with classified stamps. Infantry soldiers didn't get their service records blacked out by national security. One more question, she said, closing her notebook. If your wife contacted you tomorrow and asked you to take her back, would you? For the first time, Rodney's mask slipped. Something cold and final flickered across his features. No, detective, I wouldn't. After she left, Rodney walked to his workshop and opened his laptop. Using skills acquired in darker times, he accessed Detective Brennan's personal files. Divorced 3 years ago when she discovered her husband's affair with his secretary. No children. Parents deceased. Her entire life was her work, her reputation built on solving cases that others had given up on. She was exactly what he needed. Rodney opened a new email account under the name deep_throat and began typing. Detective Brennan, if you want to know what really happened to Nancy Klein, Virginia Kelly, and Mark Bates, meet me at the Sunrise Motel, room 18, tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Come alone. Bring a gun. You're going to need it. A friend. He sent the email, then spent the rest of the day preparing room 18 at the Sunrise Motel. The manager was a meth head named Young Bowman who rented rooms by the hour and asked no questions as long as the cash was green. By sunset, the room was ready. Hidden cameras in every corner. Audio recording equipment in the walls. Weapons cached behind the bathroom mirror and under the bed. Most importantly, a chair positioned perfectly for what Detective Brennan would find sitting in it. At 10:45 p.m., Rodney watched through night vision binoculars as Detective Brennan's unmarked sedan pulled into the motel parking lot. She sat in her car for 5 minutes, probably calling for backup despite the email's warning to come alone. She walked to room 18 with her gun drawn, professional and cautious. When she knocked, Rodney's recorded voice invited her to enter. The room was dark except for a single lamp illuminating the chair in the center. In that chair sat a figure that made Detective Brennan gasp and raise her weapon. It was Nancy Klein, or what remained of her. The body had been preserved with chemicals Rodney had learned to use in Afghanistan, posed in a sitting position, dressed in the same clothes Nancy had worn to the motel weeks earlier. Her dead eyes stared at the detective with glassy accusation. Jesus Christ, Detective Brennan whispered, her gun trained on the corpse. That's when Rodney's voice came from speakers hidden in the walls. Good evening, Detective. I'm glad you could make it. Brennan spun, searching for the source of the voice. Where are you, Klein? Watching. Always watching. You wanted to know what happened to my wife? Well, there she is. What do you think? You sick fuck. You killed her. I punished her. There's a difference. Detective Brennan backed toward the door, her gun still drawn. I'm calling this in. I wouldn't recommend that. Check your phone. Brennan glanced at her cell phone. No signal. The room was shielded, probably with the same jamming equipment Virginia Kelly had provided. You see, Detective, I have a proposition for you. You can walk out of this room and pretend you never saw anything. File a report saying you found no new leads. Close the case as persons missing, presumed dead. Or you can join Nancy in her eternal vigil. Brennan found the door handle, but it wouldn't turn. Locked from the outside. You bastard. You planned this. I plan everything, Detective. It's what keeps me alive. But here's what you don't understand. I'm not the monster in this story. I'm the consequence. Through the speakers, Rodney's voice took on the tone of a confessor. Nancy and her friends tried to have me killed in my own home. They recruited my son to help them. They planned to take everything I'd worked for and disappear together. So I gave them what they wanted. I made them disappear. That doesn't justify murder, doesn't it? Tell me, Detective, when your husband was fucking his secretary, when he was lying to your face every day for months, what did you want to do to him? Brennan's gun hand wavered slightly. That's different. I'm a cop. I follow the law. The law. Rodney's laugh was bitter. The law says I should have divorced Nancy and split my assets with the woman who tried to murder me. The law says I should have forgiven my son for helping to plan my death. The law is written by people who've never been betrayed by the people they die for. So you took justice into your own hands. I took what they owed me. Blood for blood. Betrayal for betrayal. The door lock clicked open. You're free to go, detective. But remember, you see my work now. You know what I'm capable of. If you try to come for me, I'll visit the same justice on you that I've visited on them. Detective Brennan backed out of the room, her gun still trained on Nancy's corpse. This isn't over, Klein. Yes, detective. It is. Chapter 8. The Judgment. Detective Brennan sat in her car outside the Sunrise Motel, hands shaking as she tried to process what she'd seen. Nancy Klein's corpse, preserved like some macabre museum exhibit. Rodney Klein's voice echoing from hidden speakers like the pronouncement of a dark god. She should call backup. Should call the FBI. Should bring the full weight of law enforcement down on that farm. But Rodney Klein wasn't just a murderer. He was something else. Something that had learned to kill with precision and patience in the mountains of Afghanistan. Something that planned 3 moves ahead and left no evidence behind. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the trunk of your car. Brennan popped the trunk with trembling fingers. Inside, she found a manila envelope containing photographs that made her blood turn to ice. Mark Bates suspended from chains in the grain elevator. Virginia Kelly's last moments captured in horrifying detail. And Nancy Klein, alive and terrified, looking directly into the camera as if she knew she was posing for her own obituary. But the final photograph was the one that stopped her heart. Her own house, taken through what appeared to be a sniper scope. The crosshairs centered on her bedroom window. The message was clear. Rodney Klein could reach her anytime, anywhere. Another text. Walk away, detective. Some justice operates outside your jurisdiction. Brennan drove home in a daze, the photographs burning like radioactive material in her passenger seat. At her kitchen table, she spread them out and stared at the evidence of crimes she could never prosecute. Because how do you arrest a man who doesn't exist? She'd run Rodney Klein through every database she could access. Military records classified beyond her clearance level. No criminal history. No financial irregularities. Even his property records showed nothing unusual. Just a farmer who paid his taxes and kept himself. But those photographs told a different story. They showed someone who killed with the dispassion of a surgeon and the thoroughness of an executioner. Someone who understood that justice wasn't always about law and order. Brennan picked up her phone and dialed her partner. Detective Meyer? It's Brennan. About the Klein case. I'm recommending we close it. Persons missing, presumed dead. No evidence of foul play. You sure? I thought you had a strong feeling about the husband. Sometimes feelings aren't enough. Without bodies or evidence, we've got nothing. After hanging up, Brennan walked to her fireplace and fed the photographs to the flames. She watched Nancy Klein's final moments curl and blacken, Virginia Kelly's terror reduced to ash, Mark Bates' suspended corpse consumed by fire. She was destroying evidence, obstructing justice, becoming complicit in murder. But she was also staying alive. The next morning, Rodney Klein stood in his workshop, reading Detective Brennan's official report on his laptop. Case closed. No further investigation recommended. The system had worked exactly as he planned, but there was still one loose end. Tim, now calling himself Timothy Blake, had been sending postcard from Denver for the past month. Scenic mountain views with carefully neutral messages. Weather's nice. Work is going well. Hope you're doing okay. Each postcard was a test. A probe to see if Rodney had truly forgiven his son's betrayal or was simply waiting for the right moment to complete his revenge. Rodney had kept them all, arranged chronologically on his kitchen table like evidence in a case file. The boy was scared, rightfully so, but he was also trying to rebuild his life to become something better than the weak conspirator who'd helped plan his father's murder. That afternoon, Rodney drove to Springfield and visited a pawn shop owned by a man named Santos Stewart, the same Santos Stewart he'd recommended to Tim. Stewart was a former Marine who understood the complexities of loyalty and betrayal. He's doing good work, Stewart reported. Keeps his head down, doesn't cause trouble. Asked me about getting his GED, maybe going to community college. Any contact with his old life? None. Kid's scared shitless, if you want the truth. Keeps expecting you to show up and finish what you started. Rodney nodded. And you? Any problems with our arrangement? Stewart shook his head quickly. Not a one. Boy works hard, pays his bills, minds his own business. Whatever happened between you two, he's learned his lesson. That evening, Rodney sat at his kitchen table and wrote a letter. Tim, your mother, her sister, and her lover are dead. They died because they betrayed trust, because they chose greed over loyalty, because they forgot that actions have consequences. You participated in their betrayal. You helped plan my murder. By every measure of justice, you deserve the same fate they received. But you're my son. You carry my blood, my name, my potential for both creation and destruction. You were manipulated by people who should have protected you, guided into darkness by those who claimed to love you. So I give you something I gave none of them, a choice. You can remain Timothy Blake, build a new life, become a man worthy of respect. If you choose this path, Rodney Cline will consider his son dead, but his blood redeemed. Or you can return to Missouri, to the farm, to try to claim what you think you deserve. If you choose this path, you will discover exactly why your mother's conspiracy failed so completely. Choose wisely. Choose finally. Choose only once. Your father. Rodney mailed the letter to Santos Stewart's shop, with instructions to give it to Timothy Blake in person. Then he walked to his workshop and began preparing for either possibility. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. 3 weeks later, Timothy Blake stood at the edge of Rodney Cline's property, holding his father's letter in hands that hadn't stopped shaking since he'd read it. The farm spread before him in the golden light of late afternoon. 600 acres of corn and soybeans and memories. He could see the main house where his mother had made breakfast every morning for 23 years. The workshop where his father had taught him to use tools and fix machines. The grain elevator where everything had ended. Tim had driven from Denver in a truck Santos Stewart had helped him buy, wrestling with the choice his father had given him. Return and face whatever justice Rodney Cline deemed appropriate, or disappear forever into the identity of Timothy Blake. But there was a third option, one his father hadn't considered. Tim walked across the field toward the main house, each step carrying the weight of decision. He found Rodney sitting on the front porch, a rifle across his knees, waiting with the patience of a man who'd spent 3 tours watching for enemies. Hello, Dad. Tim. Rodney's voice carried no warmth, no welcome. I wonder which choice you'd make. I'm not here to claim anything. I'm not here to try to take the farm or challenge you. Then why are you here? Tim sat down on the porch steps, keeping distance between himself and his father. To apologize. To tell you that I understand what I did was unforgivable. To ask if there's any way I can make it right. Rodney studied his son's face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion. You participated in planning my murder, Tim. How do you make that right? I don't know, but I want to try. Your mother and her accomplices are dead. Are you asking me to resurrect them? I'm asking you to help me figure out how to live with what I've done. For the first time, Rodney's expression softened slightly. That's not something I can help you with, son. That's something you'll carry alone. Tim nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know, but I needed you to know that I understand what I lost. Not just your trust, but the man I could have been if I'd been stronger. And what man are you now? Timothy Blake works construction in Denver. He's learning electrical work, saving money for community college. He doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, doesn't cause trouble. He's trying to build something worth building. And Tim Cline died in that grain elevator with Mom and the others. He deserved to die. Rodney set the rifle aside and leaned forward in his chair. You want redemption, son? You want to make something right? More than anything. Then prove it. Prove that Timothy Blake is worth the blood that flows in his veins. Prove that something good can come from the Cline line. Ow! Rodney pulled an envelope from his shirt pocket. There's a family in Kansas City. Adrian McPherson, his wife Carrie, their 8-year-old daughter Young. 3 months ago, Adrian testified against a drug dealer named Brian Meyer in a federal case. Last week, Meyer was acquitted on a technicality. Tim took the envelope with trembling hands. Meyer's going to kill the McPherson family to send a message to other potential witnesses. The FBI knows it, the local police know it, but they can't prove it. Can't stop it legally. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking Timothy Blake to save 3 innocent lives. I'm asking him to use what he learned in his father's house to protect people who can't protect themselves. Tim stared at the address written on the envelope. You want me to kill Brian Meyer. I want you to choose who you really are. The kind of man who protects innocent families, or the kind of man who stands by while evil triumphs. And if I say no, then you drive back to Denver and live whatever life you can manage. Timothy Blake becomes exactly what he appears to be, a construction worker who minded his own business while family died. And if I say yes, then you discover whether the Klein blood runs true, whether you can honor the debt you owe to justice. Tim stood up, the envelope feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. What happened to forgiveness, Dad? What happened to mercy? I forgave you by letting you live. Mercy is what I'm offering the McPherson family through you. That night, Tim sat in a motel room in Kansas City, studying the contents of the envelope. Photos of Brian Meyer, his known associates, his daily routine, floor plans of his house, security details, everything needed to plan an operation. At the bottom of the envelope was a single photograph. 8-year-old young McPherson on a playground, laughing as she swung higher and higher toward the sky. Tim stared at that photograph for hours, seeing in young McPherson's innocent joy everything his own choices had destroyed. His mother's betrayal had started with small compromises, tiny steps away from honor. His own participation had begun with a single lie, a single moment of choosing convenience over loyalty. But maybe redemption could begin the same way, with a single choice to protect rather than destroy. 3 days later, Brian Meyer was found dead in his car, the victim of what police called a professional hit. No witnesses, no evidence, no leads. Just another criminal who'd made too many enemies. The McPherson family never knew how close they'd come to death. Never knew that their salvation had come from the son of a man who understood that justice sometimes required blood. Tim returned to Denver and resumed his life as Timothy Blake. But he kept the photograph of young McPherson on his nightstand, a reminder that some debts can only be paid with action. And on a farm in Missouri, Rodney Klein